I suck at jiu-jitsu. How do I suck less at jiu-jitsu?
I guess to suck less.
The diabolical leader of the Headnought Squad.
James, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, brother. How are you?
I am doing good, man. I'm excited to meet you and get to talk.
Nice to meet you. Yeah, I watched a little bit of one of your shows the other day just to kind of see what it was like, and it was great. Really
All
entertaining.
right. What'd you watch?
I watched a little bit of one with a couple of guys that you came up with training.
Oh, okay. Yeah, with the two Justins that I just did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of the ones with you and Chris.
All right. Sweet. Sweet. I'm glad, man. You're like the only person that's watched the show before. So this will be this could be wild.
I didn't watch all of it. Like I don't have time for podcasts normally, like I like podcasts, but I rarely find the time to finish them.
I totally get that. It's weird nowadays too, because you have so many things that want your attention. Every time you're on your phone, there's an app that's like, hey, just give me 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes. I'll show you 100 different videos.
I turned all my notifications off for that reason, because I don't want this thing telling me, hey, check me, check me. Like, oh my God, it's never ending.
It is. And it's also like the problem that I have with it is at a point, you literally are letting the algorithm think for you. It's just whatever is pushed to the top of your phone. You just like it, skip it, whatever. But it just goes, oh, don't worry. You don't have to think anymore. I'll think for you.
We're all in our own little echo chambers.
Yes. And that can be super dangerous.
And a lot of us are completely oblivious to confirmation bias. So that's scary.
Yeah, that's true. It's weird to think about. I mean, a perfect example of this is when we are doing jujitsu and we're like, oh yeah, everybody will love jujitsu. There's no human being that wouldn't just absolutely want to dedicate their entire life to jujitsu, throw everything else away, and just be all in on jujitsu.
But I thought too, but my wife doesn't want to have anything to do with this.
Yep, that is the battle of being a married jiu-jitsu black belt, man. Yeah, you can't. I was just talking about this the other day with somebody. Like, it's weird because my wife has trained for periods of time, but it's weird because you have this thought of like, okay, we're equals everywhere else, but then when we step on the mat, I am the instructor and you're the student, and that dynamic doesn't usually doesn't usually work.
No.
So
But I can get her to participate in jujitsu when I just make it playful, when I don't say stuff, when I don't get pedantic and start telling her about this detail and this wrist control and whatever. And if I just like, grab her head and giggle, then she'll tuck her shoulders up, and she'll start to play a little bit and have fun that way. So at least I can get a little bit in with her.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So, I like to even, go back and kind of start at where you began jujitsu. And I think we'll get to that in a point. But what is really interesting to me right now, and kind of Jack Topher and Chris Burns, who were both just on the show, both recommended you. And they both recommended you and said something along the lines of, man, you have to interview James Driskill, really cool guy, really unique guy. And he's Rickson Gracie's full-time Oogie.
Mm.
What is that like? How did that situation kind of arise?
How did that arise and what is that like? I mean, what it's like is kind of, probably every jujitsu guy's dream to be able to kind of play with and learn from and feel the invisible stuff from the grandmaster almost every day, as well as, just kind of being around him a lot and absorbing all of that life wisdom and mastery and discipline and honor and Bushido that he carries all the time. And I guess the way that it came about was, I started with Rickson in 2003. That's kind of a long story. Maybe we can get into that later if you want. But he moved to Brazil when I was kind of midway through blue belt or so and was gone for a while. And then he would come back from time to time and we would always kind of connect here and there. But our closeness kind of, we separated a little bit for years because he was just gone a lot. And then I moved to Oregon and he'd come up there for seminar and I'd see him up there. And it was just kind of like here and there seeing each other. And then I moved from Oregon back to California so that my wife could be with her mom as she was kind of passing in 2022. And while I was kind of there in the middle of nowhere, her mom lived up kind of in the sticks, and I didn't have much to do. I messaged Hickson. I was like, hey, he was in LA. I was like, hey, I want to come see you. And he said, yeah, sure, come for a class and we'll hang out. And then I did, and that was great. And we kind of, reconnected again and talked on the phone some. And then after a little bit, he called me and just said, hey, what do you think about, assisting me in my lessons? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. It's a bit of a trek from where I'm at, but I'm down to come down for a few days a week. So I started helping him in Torrance or wherever his studio was there in LA for a few months, and then he decided he was moving to Florida, and he kind of asked me if I was interested in coming along and continuing to assist him and help him be okay and kind of, help demonstrate some of the moves that are a little more damaging or some of the moves that are maybe a little more difficult because of his, mobility issues that are cropping up a little bit now in the older age. And I was lucky that my wife was open to it and that we were kind of in this point in our lives where we were sort of standing at the center of multiple directions we could go in. And this was just kind of serendipitous and perfect timing. And what a huge honor for me. Like, how many amazing people could he have chosen for that role? And I'm nothing special, I've just known him for a long time, and I've taught his stuff that he's taught me for a long time. But there's a lot of guys like that, and a lot of them come and see us on a regular basis, and I get to see guys that I looked up to when I was coming up that maybe I haven't really been able to spend a lot of time with. Like Dave Kama just came into town, which was great to hang out with him and share the mats with him. What an honor. And I think moving to Florida was a big change from California, but my wife was excited to kind of get out of the small town vibe of nothing going on. And not like there's a ton going on here in Vero Beach. It's a pretty small town too, but I'm just really excited because there's Asian restaurants here and I love Asian food. There was no Asian food where we were. So I had to try to make it and it was not good.
So, man, there's so much to unpack just from what you said. So, just first, what is the decision like? If you're 18 and single, if the grandmaster of jujitsu says, "Hey, move across the country," it's probably a lot easier to say, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this." But you're married, you're a business owner, you have your hand in multiple things. What was that conversation like? What was that decision together like to make that move?
For me, the cannabis businesses that I had before I sold and let go of when my mother-in-law became really ill so that we could focus, so my wife could focus on helping her and I could focus on being there for my wife like a battery energy. And um I guess actually I missed your question. Sorry. Got a lot.
No, just that decision making process.
Uh,
If of hey, let's move across the country.
Yeah, for me, the decision was kind of like, yeah, of course, I'm going to go and serve my master. Like I have all the marketable skills and a lot of the strength of character that I possess came from him. And I was on a pretty dark path when I met him, and he kind of pulled me out of the gutters and showed me a path of discipline and of strength, but also of gentleness and, all of these qualities that I struggled with when I was younger. So for me, the decision was instantaneously, yeah, I'm definitely into this. And it was just whether or not my wife was going to be also keen to move across the country to a completely different environment. And luckily, like I said, the timing was perfect. We were in a town that she didn't really enjoy because there's not enough going on. And also that town was the place that her mom passed, and that has a lot of pain and memories and stuff. So I think she was ready for a change, and she really like Rickson and his wife Cassia, they love the tropical weather. I think they came here because it's more like Brazil and sunny and humid and hot, and the beaches are beautiful. And my wife likes all that stuff too. I'm kind of like, it's too hot here for me, but but I'll survive. It's just I think I was really lucky that she was so open to this new experience, and that she's thriving here.
That's really cool. And I'm sure that, and I mean, I'm sure that after your mother passing, that could definitely be fueling too. But still, it has to be, and maybe it wasn't. Maybe, she's just been used to being married to you for long enough. But it still has to be a wild thought to walk into, right?
And it's tough for her too because she's in the entertainment industry. Her mom was like a international icon, like just crazy famous. And so her, Chloe always wanted to follow in mom's footsteps in some way or another. And so being close to LA, I think, is important for her to be able to, like, she's there now. She's in California now shooting some Netflix documentary on her mom, like, some piece for that. And so, I think it's harder for her having to commute back and forth, but I'm just lucky that she loves me so much, and she knows how much I love Rickson, and she knows how much I love jujitsu and how much I love teaching, and wants me to have the opportunity to share my dreams and my passion and my gifts and my love with the world, as well as continue learning from, my idol.
That's really cool. Tell me, and you kind of hinted at it, but tell me the start of jujitsu for you.
The start, I did a lot of martial arts when I was younger, a lot of striking kind of stuff. And, I thought I was pretty tough and whatever, but I met a jiu-jitsu person at some point, and they kind of showed me differently. And so I became really interested in this weird Mexican ground karate. And 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 so I think when I was in LA, I kind of went through a pretty hard time. I was dealing with like drugs, and I was homeless for some time, and I was just having a pretty rough time. And I had a friend that was a fan of Rickson, and I didn't know who Rickson was. Everybody knew who Hoist was at that time. This was back in like 2003 when I started with him. And so my friend tells me about Rickson and how, he's on another level, and tells me that he's pretty close by. So I didn't have any money. I didn't even really have a place to live. At that time, I think I was squatting in an apartment complex that was being remodeled or something, taking showers with a water hose and going to the bathroom and the porta potty and stuff. And I had a friend that was so wonderful. They paid for 1 month of jujitsu classes for me at Rickson's. And then I was hooked immediately. And then I became, I guess, sort of close with him, as much as a new white belt can. And I think he kind of saw my circumstance and maybe felt pity for me. And so he didn't charge me. And then, like a lot of the old school stories, I'd sweep the mats, and I'd come over to his house, and I was pretty handy. I could fix things, and I was pretty good, like, with tools and stuff. So I'd come over to his house, and I'd help him fix things or do gardening or fix holes in the wall that chrome punched or whatever, like stuff like this, build little stair steps and things. And then he would give me like free little lessons in the garage. And as a white belt, I don't have any appreciation for that. Like he's just, we're just playing around in the garage. Looking back, I'm like, man, this guy gave me like how many tens of thousands of dollars worth of free lessons in the garage? Like, holy shit, what a lucky bastard you are, with no like gratitude for that at the time. I mean, obviously I was grateful that he was helping me out and giving me something to do and stuff, but I don't think I really understood the impact that he had on me at that time. Not just with the jujitsu training, but with the kindness and the thoughtfulness of my situation. And then, I just trained there, and I think sometime in blue belt, I got interested in teaching, and he gave me the opportunity to teach the kids classes, and that went really well. And I kind of took over the whole kids program and started kind of designing it and stuff. And then it became, as a blue and purple belt, kind of starting to fill in for instructors as they maybe got sick or whatever, and so on until eventually I'm teaching most of the classes.
Wow, that's really cool. At what point uh were you no longer homeless in this like kind of jujitsu journey?
I think it's hard to remember, man. It's like 2003. It's a long time. It was probably only a few months. That apartment complex I was squatting in, I wasn't squatting illegally. Actually, I was sort of managing or acting kind of like an on-site liaison for workers that were coming in. So, the owner had kind of hired me to live in there like a bum and make sure that the plumbers do good work and that the, so and so does what they're supposed to do and the landscapers show up on time and whatever. So once that project was complete, I think I was homeless again, and then I couch crashed for a while and slept in my car and stuff. And then I met a friend who kind of just took me in and gave me a place and kind of started to try to get me on my feet. And I started creating more business through my handyman work kind of stuff, created a little company through that. And so I was able to start to make enough money to pay for my own place. And I would always, as soon as I had the opportunity, I moved right next to Hickson's school because I hate driving, especially in LA. Oh my God, what a nightmare.
I'm
So
sure.
I would always I moved my place next to his school, and then eventually Crone moved the school to Culver City and move close to there. And wherever the school went, I would just move right next to it. But I think the homelessness wasn't for more than a few months or so, and then I started to get on my feet, and the jiu-jitsu gave me so much passion and drive and confidence, and I think still at that point, even though I had been in plenty of fights and had some training and stuff, I still wasn't sure of myself, and I still had a lot to prove to myself. And so I was fairly aggressive, I think, and confrontational, and I took things, took offense to things and was ready to snap and, this kind of stuff a lot. And the jiu-jitsu really chilled me out because, as we all know, that stuff humbles you and also at the same time shows you you're not made of glass, and at the same time shows you you're capable of learning complicated things, and gives you that sense of community that we all fall in love with beyond the training itself. And that discipline really helped a lot for me, and just having that like competitions to look forward to, especially competitions, kept me on the straight and narrow because my tendency was a little extreme at the time. I would extremely use drugs, or I would extremely seek pleasures through dangerous activities and stuff, motorcycles or skydiving or whatever kind of, surfing huge waves or, things like that. And the jiu-jitsu, I think, evened me out a little bit and kept me off of that roller coaster of the super high highs and the super low lows. Kind of gave me a reason not to smoke cigarettes, and a reason to get up at the same time, and a reason to eat healthier, although that one took much more time. Crone used to make fun of me because he'd come over to my house from time to time, and it was probably a 75% chance when he came in, I would be sitting at the table eating like a pumpkin pie with a spoon and a tub of Cool Whip. And my intention was to eat all of it, no slicing necessary. He'd be like, "What the fuck is wrong?"
The that's really interesting that you say that too, because a lot of people, it seems like people who love extremes are the people that really fall in love with jujitsu. There is something addicting about jujitsu. This episode is brought to you by Kicksite. You guys know that I'm all about efficiency, whether it's training or running a gym. Kicksite helps me do just that with their all-in-one gym management software. But today, I want to tell you about something completely free that Kicksite does. Kicksite's blog for coaches. They've got some of the best articles out there, including topics on student retention, Cyber Monday deals, and even how to create engaging content for your social media audience. It's packed with practical tips that help you build your community and keep your students coming back. I've personally found some great insights that I've even applied at my gym, Head Nod HQ. So if you're looking for free resources to help your gym thrive, head over to kicksite.net/blog and check it out. Seriously, whether you are a coach or a gym owner, it is worth your time. Let's get back to the episode. A lot of times in jiu-jitsu, people struggle with balance. And even with competition, people struggle, I think, with balance. They want to cut 40 pounds, then they want to gain 60 pounds. And then, it's just like it tends to be that way. But you kind of put it as that jujitsu helped you with this balance. What did that kind of look like? Why do you think that is?
I think I think the jujitsu gave me something that I cared about a lot because I'm fairly analytical. I wouldn't say that I'm super like creative or anything. I'm more like analyzing things. And so looking at jujitsu as a physics problem to solve was so interesting to me as a mechanical issue of especially the way that Rickson taught us, it was like he didn't use a lot of language. It was like feel what's going on here. And so there was a lot of thinking in my head about why does this work and why does that work and as I started teaching and stuff, it was like somebody's going to ask me a question and I'm not going to know how to answer it, and my analytical mind and my OCD and whatever it is about me couldn't tolerate that. Like I was like, man, I don't like not having a clear answer for you right now, so hold on, and I'm going to go find it and then I'm going to come back to you. And that was always the way for me, and so there was never a stone left unturned. So much so that, now I know a bunch of useless crap too. Like, I mean, it's not useless. It's fun. It's entertaining to do, but it's not necessarily the most high percentage stuff.
Hmm.
But I wanted to know, how do I do this fifth recounter to this rolling, flying darce, whatever, And and I think the balance I think came from A, I don't want to be embarrassed because I don't know the answer to your question. And B, I don't want to be embarrassed because I'm gassing out because I have a lifestyle that is not suited to this sort of training. And also the competition aspect, gave me a goal, to strive toward and a reason to have cyclical training and stuff. But to be fair, the balance is still manifesting,
Yes.
we all struggle. And I think for a long time, although the balance was improved, no outsider would have said that I was balanced. That was just more balanced than before because the cyclical nature, we would train super hard for a month or so and compete, and then we would have a week or two of utter debauchery and
Hmm.
partying and girls and clubs and pills and drinking and all this stuff and smoking and whatever, and then cut all that crap cold turkey in a month or two of super duper hard disciplined training, sleeping, eating, whatever, and then a week or two of debauchery. And this is for years, just this cycle over and over and over. So not super balanced, but more balanced than just kind of the debauchery that I was living previously.
That makes sense. So you started, I mean, when you got to start teaching relatively early, for a lot
Early.
of people, but then on top of that, you taught for quite a long time at Hickson School, and then when it turned over to Cron, how did that kind of go for you? How long did you teach at those schools?
I guess I probably started teaching at Hickson's on Wilshire in maybe like '04, '05 or something like that. Starting with the kids and then starting, like I said, maybe filling in for the fill-in who
Hmm.
also didn't show up. And it was kind of strange sometimes, like teaching a class wearing a purple belt with black belts lined up on the wall. I don't, okay, well, I don't know if I want to teach you anything,
Hmm.
but then, eventually as it goes, the teachers and the black belts move on. They open their own schools and it makes room for the younger guys to come up and fill in those shoes. And so I just started taking over more and more classes as people like Henry moved on and people like Shane Rice moved on. And and then Crone started teaching, and then when we moved to Culver City, it was me and Crone teaching most of the classes. There was a couple of others that would teach a class here and there, or they would fill in for us. And we created new classes together, like kind of beginners, fundamental classes and things, and created like competition classes and stuff like that. Created more variety in the class structure when we got to the Culver City location. And we had the really awesome tire spring floor kind of thing there. So that was really fun, upgrade from doing judo at the old school to the new school. I think one week Cronin and I did, I don't know, 5 or 10,000 throws or something. Just like, oh fuck.
Ooh,
Thank God for this springy floor. Man,
man, those subfloors are helpful, but still, 5,000 throws is a lot of, that's
it's
rough on the body.
it's nuts. Something that he heard from Jacare.
And then it's one of those when you're young, like, okay, well, I guess we got to try this now to see.
Yeah. And that's another thing with the balance is that now as I'm older, I understand, but when I was younger, I didn't. And I'm very grateful that Hickson trained us in a way that made us want to quit a lot and made us mentally tough. And so, I think it would be hard to make one of Hickson's guys like give up or quit, like just because we're tired or uncomfortable or something like this, because the training even off the mats was made that way, like a lot of training is. But I think some of the training was so geared toward making us mentally strong that it was damaging to our bodies, like, a little too damaging. So I've done quite a lot of damage to my body, as a lot of people who have been in it as long as we have also experienced that. And I think looking back, I would have probably advised myself to tap more often, especially to those neck cranks.
Oh,
When I came up, it was like, that's not a choke, that's a crank. And you say that because you're not supposed to tap to it. Like, why are you tapping to that? That's not a choke. But looking back, I'm like, well, that's even more reason to tap. That's
yes.
damaging your spine, bro. Like, it's not just putting up your blood and letting you sleep for a few minutes. But
Man,
this culture of the old school jujitsu of, we're not going to tap to foot locks and we're not going to tap to neck cranks. And, if it's just pain, if it's not going to make me uh, pop something or fall asleep, or, even if I fall asleep, it's like, you don't tap for strangles and stuff, like sleep like a man. It was like that. I would like to advise the newer generation to, you don't need to do that. You can build your mental training by holding your breath, by, sitting, doing a wall sit for as long as you possibly can until your body is quivering and shaking and you want to let go. You can build that mental toughness in ways that aren't quite as damaging. But there is something about the fear of, I'm going to permanently injure myself or hurt myself. If that's not present, the mental training isn't quite at its highest level.
hmm
So there has to be that element of danger to really develop that ability to stay calm under pressure.
And yeah, I fully agree with that. And it's tough because as anyone who started in the early 2000s will tell you, or before that, will tell you, like they give these warnings of, man, you got to protect your body, you got to be smart with your training. But then also, it's like, like you said, if I could have, gone back and told myself something about like, yeah, just tap more. The problem is like, would you have listened? Just with how, especially with how the culture was, just like the culture literally was when I tell my students that, early on, there would be a lot of people that simply wouldn't tap to chokes. And they're like, what do you mean they wouldn't tap to chokes? Like they would go to sleep every single time that you caught them in a choke because they were like, well, it's not going to kill me. And yeah, that was the culture in coming up. So it's hard to, it's hard to really, even if there's regret around it, it's hard to really give a warning to the next generation and assume that they're going to heed that warning, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard to tell somebody who's made of rubber bands and feels no pain, you need to stretch after class and stuff like that, but I think it's something that it's like a habit, and if you build that habit early, it becomes so much easier when you're older, when it's not so easy to do it, like that discipline to just incorporate recovery and maintenance and even um, improvements into your athletic system. That's not based on bodybuilding. Like I'm sure a lot of people watch Gordon Ryan in the gym pushing bench press and stuff, and thinking, "Whoa, wow, I want to be like that." But I think Gordon Ryan's probably going to be in a lot of pain too, like for the rest of his life. And I'm not sure that that's the modality that's most useful, even though he's extremely effective and successful, and nobody can argue with that. I think like for instance, like, I don't have any interest in doing curls here. If I'm going to do curls, it's gonna be like here or like here or something, because that's, I feel like represents more of what we're going to deal with. I want to strengthen those muscles, but in weird scenarios, because
Hmm.
that's where we're going to get hurt when we get stuck in some weird scramble where we're twisted and we're trying to push off the floor and then something pops. And I'm like, fuck, I never trained for that. Everything was so linear in the gym.
Well, and you see, like, and I think that this is a lot of the separation comes, and maybe this wasn't like this for you when you were coming up, but I think a lot of the separation comes from like when you're young, it tends to be about winning competitions. What's the biggest competition that I can do? Can I be the best jujitsu athlete that I can? But then there's this point where you get to where you go, oh, can I be the best jujitsu practitioner that I can? It's not, I want to do this forever, not just till I'm 30, and how as you've aged, how has that adjustment been for you? And when did you start to notice that, hey, I should be tapping to these neck cranks?
Mm. I got boxes full of gold medals and trophies and swords and belts and all the crap that they give you for winning these things. And when I was younger, I thought as soon as I have all this stuff, everybody is going to see me and go, wow, you are awesome. And even, the first like 5 or 6 medals that I got, I like mounted them nice and put them on the wall. And when people come over, nobody fucking gave a shit. Nobody cared. It was like, you spent your whole life trying to become Batman. Big deal. Let's go out for lunch. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, and so, I think that was an eye opener. Like, this isn't quite as important as I thought it might be. At least for my own ego,
Hmm.
to feel powerful amongst my friends and whatever. But I think, at some point, probably probably wasn't until black belt really that I realized the training that we were doing, me and Cronin and a couple of the others, was so grueling and so damaging for our bodies and so intense. There was no room for anything else in our lives, and I was thinking back on observing Rickson when I knew him younger and before he left for Brazil, and observing the people that I've been, lucky enough to meet that have been at the top of their field. And all of these people shared this common thread of they don't really know anything else. All they know is this thing that they're the master of. And for a while, I was going to dinner parties or events or whatever with people that weren't in the jiu-jitsu community, and I had nothing to offer to any conversation. I was, like clueless. I didn't know anything about the current events. I didn't know anything about, what was going on in stock markets or whatever. Like I didn't know anything about what was on TV. in the midst of some hour-long dinner party, I just sit there quietly listening to these people talk about stuff I don't know about. And then somebody would mention in passing some TV show where they saw a fight, and I would get excited, like, oh, wait. And then they'd move on and be, oh, shit, okay, well, nobody wants to talk about that fight. I could have talked about that, and that didn't sit well with me. I didn't really like that. And at that point, I think I realized I want to learn more stuff. I want to learn other stuff. And I became more interested in being kind of a jack of all trades than this like best in the world. Because up until that point, I was kind of with Chrome, like, let's go win everything. Let's just go become the best ever at all this stuff. And then seeing that, how much it would take, how much sacrifice for everything else in my life that it would take, as well as the damage it was doing to my body, as well as realizing here I am. Maybe I'm at that point, at some point, maybe I'm in the top 5 or 10% or something like this. And I'm noticing each percentage higher is taking an exponentially larger amount of resources and dedication and strength and power and reserve and all this kind of stuff. And it was just so grueling, the grind and that in that top tier level right there. And watching Crone do it, I mean, the guy's got an incredible work ethic and he works really hard. And I was just like, you know what? I think I'm going to go to college and like take some classes for fun. And that really irritated him and kind of alienated him and may have been, part of the seed that came between us. I'm not sure, but I started dedicating more time to branching out into other things and learning other stuff and traveling, and I, spend more time surfing and stuff. And I was no longer dedicated to, I want to be a world champion. I want to be an ADCC champion. I want to be an MMA champion, whatever, this kind of stuff. I kind of let that go. And I realized I really love teaching. I really love helping Crone get ready for these things, or helping Morgan get ready for these things, or, Eric, or any of the guys that I trained with all the time every day that were monsters and killers, or even helping the students get ready for tournaments. I loved answering their questions and seeing them do something that we worked on in a tournament, and their excitement about it. This was so fulfilling to me to teach that I decided, I can let go of a lot of this like search for athleticism and optimization and efficiency in my jiu-jitsu training and stuff, and spend a little bit of more time with my girlfriend, now wife, or spend more times with my friends who had all but written me off as, this guy, all he does is jiu-jitsu. He's just autistic and wants to hug men on the floor. So, but I think that's kind of how I started to find more balance in another way in my life. I was, I think, too extreme. Nothing wrong with that, like, I'm grateful that Rickson dedicated his life to jiu-jitsu and Bushido, and that I could learn from him. But I saw some of the struggles that he went through, and I wanted to save myself from some of those things too. But I'll never experience the amazing highs that he had as the GOAT, and not many of us ever will. And it takes a lot. And I really respect him for that.
So looking back for you, do you ever, especially now, just seeing where you're at in life, do you ever have any regret of not of going like, man, I could have pushed a little more, I could have stayed in it a little longer as a competitor, and I would have gotten more results? Or if you are you at this point where you're kind of separated from it and like, yeah, that was a part of my life, and I respect it for what it is, but it's over.
Like, I had a great time competing in jiu-jitsu. I feel like I proved pretty much everything I needed to, whether it was in a competition or whether it was in training or whether it was in a self-defense situation, in the real world. I feel like I proved all that stuff to myself. I've been so blessed to be able to train with some of the greatest fighters ever, and I feel like any of them who I trained with, if you talk to them, would say, yeah, he's solid, and that's enough for me. I don't need to be better than everyone else or anyone else. I just want to be as good as I can be, and especially I want to be as good a teacher as I can be. And I want to make it as clear and concise for people, even if they have a difficult time learning this stuff, I want to make sure that that I cater to every learning style, and I have a special place in my heart for the ones that have the hardest time picking it up. And a lot of times those are the big guys, really big guys. They don't have much incentive to learn these invisible details and these efficiencies and things because, if the shit hits the fan, they can just say, "Ugh," until they meet the guy that's bigger than them. And I love solving those problems for people, and or no, I love helping people solve their own problems, because I truly believe if I give you the answer, you'll remember it, maybe. But if I help you discover the answer, it'll go into a deeper part of your brain that you will understand more clearly and keep longer and integrate better into the things that you already know. So I like to think of myself more like a guide than an instructor. Like, what does it feel like if you move that way? Oh, maybe try the other way. Like teach people to explore, and this is what Rickson did to modify the jujitsu that he learned into his invisible jujitsu, and he just explored, and he was like, what does it feel like if I turn this way? That feels difficult. This way is closed too. That way is closed. This way feels a little bit open. What if he moves that foot? How can I get him to move that foot? And just this real thoughtful process. I remember plenty of times me and somebody, usually Crone, in between classes when nobody's around, we'd be working on something that we saw in competition. Maybe, like way back in the day, maybe Marcelo's doing his like sit-up guard where he's koalaing onto someone's leg or something or whatever, or X guard or something. And we're like, how do we deal with this? And we'd be in there for hours workshopping like this way, that way, whatever, trying to figure it out. And then Rickson would just randomly come in. What are you guys doing? Like, oh, we're trying to figure out how to beat this Marcelo thing. He'd watch us for a minute. He'd be like, do on me. He'd say to do it again a couple of times or whatever. And then he'd make a little shift. It wouldn't be anything crazy, just a little shift in his weight or something. He'd try now. And it's like, fuck, I can't move. Like, I can't do anything. Like, it was so simple. Here we are for hours trying all this intricate stuff and flipping and rolling and grabbing and breaking grips and whatever. And he just shifts his weight a little bit and you can't move. And you're like, oh, oh. Yeah. So, I mean, wish I was that smart.
when when you so like it's kind of two parts to this. Is one, are you I know you've taught at other schools too since then, but are you teaching jujitsu now? And then regardless, what is it like, kind of getting to be a student again under Rickson?
Getting to be a student again is really great. And it's something that I missed for years. And I think probably a lot of black belts who move on can can understand, it's like not having guidance and not having that wisdom of I've been doing this way longer than you, kid. Let's listen here. You're doing that a little wrong, and it's going to cause these problems. And having that again is great. And also, Rickson, now that he's older and he's got Parkinson's, he's got two hip replacements. His physicality is diminished quite a bit, and so the jujitsu that he's teaching is so perfect. It's so geared towards people who are diminished and people who are naturally weaker or more timid or whatever, and that's who we're really kind of keen to reach out and help these days, is the weakest among us, the ones who need jujitsu the most. We're not so interested in the combat athletes and stuff anymore. Those guys are probably going to be okay, in the grand scheme of things. And I'm happy to teach those guys, but learning the same jujitsu that he always taught, but now from him in this weaker body, it's getting even better by necessity. Like he can't do some of the stuff from before as well. And so that's getting changed. And he's spending more time with smaller, weaker people and noticing what small changes in detail help them to accomplish something against someone who's much bigger and stronger or younger or more athletic or whatever. And so being able to learn this stuff that's so efficient, that's so simple, that's such a small set of moves, And that is so geared towards reality, not necessarily going and playing a sport and playing a game and trying to win a medal, which is really fun and really cool. And I think it's great training for anyone, even to learn how to fight. It's not really a fight, and there are still a lot of things missing. And as much as I know that most purple belts would be fine if some rando with no training attacked them on the street, still I worry that they might not be prepared for that punch because they don't ever train for punches. And I know they're tough and I know they can take a punch, but are they also exposing themselves to violence and rage and hate and aggression and the things that can cause a natural fight or flight response, even in really tough, really trained people? I've seen, strong, badass champion brown belts freeze in a street fight because their whole life has been this game with their friends. And occasionally with some dude who wants to break their arm on a mat with everybody watching where nothing could ever actually get out of control.
Mhm.
Everybody's going to swarm the mat before this thing gets out of control. So I really want everybody who thinks of jujitsu training as a way to protect themselves to just think about incorporating some of that stuff from time to time. It doesn't have to take over the entirety of their training, but maybe they can start with 10% of their training. Just, okay, we're just gonna touch each other's face while we're doing this jiu-jitsu. I'm not gonna punch you. I'm not gonna poke you in the eye. I'm not gonna pull on your ear. I'm just gonna try and see if I can put my hands on your head and just hold it there. And if you can't stop me from holding my hand on your head, or even worse, you can't stop me from pulling my hand to my shoulder and then touching your head and pulling my hand to my shoulder and then touching your head, no damage to you. I'm not sure that these guys are going to be prepared for the hatred and the violence and the chaos that can happen, from 0 to 100 real quick. And
Mhm.
you get somebody that's kind of medicated on something that makes them feel no pain, and suddenly, your joint locks aren't stopping them, and it's just something that I would love to see more jiu-jitsu schools incorporate a little more self-defense into their training, even though a lot of them see it as maybe boring. It's not quite as gamified. There's not really as many ways to win. It's like more choreographed for that's, on some level. But the goal would be to get it out of that choreography into, okay, let me really see if I can actually put a mark on you and do a little damage to you, of course, over time, progressing to that. And I mean, Hickson's idea would be that it's 50-50. 50% of your time spent dealing with headlocks and punch blocks and knife attacks and things like this, and multiple opponents, and then another 50% kind of rolling around on the ground and catching omoplatas and stuff and whatever.
So, on that note, have you ever, I know you started relatively early. Did you ever have to take part in any challenge matches at the gym
Uh, like with my own brethren or with people who kind of stormed in?
with people that stormed in?
There wasn't, I don't think there was, my memory is kind of shoddy. I smoke a lot of weed. Uh, I don't think I remember that, but there definitely were people that came in with bad intentions, or people that came in with a philosophy that didn't align, or people that came in that were maybe just inconsiderate and overly aggressive, or had gang affiliations, or just the characters that I personally didn't want around. And every once in a while, some guy would come in and he would be mouthy and he would be big and strong and he would be covered in gang tattoos and he would be kind of, you know, giving an attitude of you're not in charge around here, or I don't have to do what you say, or I'm kind of the top dog. And for whatever reason, when it came time for open mat, I could never feel those guys tap. Like they'd be tap 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 so many times, and fuck, sorry, bro. Like I couldn't feel that. Are you okay? Like wake up. And most of the time, they wouldn't come back after that, and I think that was for the best. But as
I
far As far as challenge matches, that's probably the closest that I ever came, is just regular roles with assholes that came in and wanted to show off or something.
Yeah, and that's also something nowadays that people can't comprehend is that there was a period of time, a long period of time, where it wasn't like people heard of jujitsu on the Joe Rogan experience and were like, oh, I'm so excited to try this art that I'm sure works. A lot of it was, I don't really think that this works. And that was their intention of coming and trying out jujitsu.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was even one of those guys.
Oh,
Like
really?
in the beginning, my introduction to jujitsu was getting choked out by a guy because I didn't think it was going to work. And I thought I was a badass striker and I thought I was going to beat this guy up. This is in Texas and where I'm from. And after that, I was like, like I need to incorporate this quick. Like, holy crap. And he was nobody, like he probably wasn't even good. And I don't even remember what school or who that was, it's nobody in particular, and changed the course of my life. But I had a friend that we did a lot of striking with named Rocky that I grew up with as a teenager. And he and I would get together like all the time, and we would watch an episode of Dragon Ball Z, and we would put pads on, and we would go in the parking lot, and we'd beat the shit out of each other, and we'd go back and watch another episode of Dragon Ball Z when we were teenagers. And that was like our training for years, like a fight club, like whatever. And oh no, I lost where I was going. What were we talking about before that?
Honestly, I think we were just talking about Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we were just talking about like, submission, getting submitted because you were assuming the
Oh,
jujitsu didn't work.
I remember. So Rocky and I would go dojo storm. We thought we were tough guys, so we would go find kung fu schools and taekwondo schools and stuff and whatever, and come in and very respectfully request to spar. I mean, we didn't come in like assholes. We would be polite, and if they declined, we would leave. And most would decline, and every once in a while they would accept. And most of the time, if they accepted, they were legit and they kicked the crap out of us. I remember this one kung fu. We didn't have a lot of respect for the kung fu schools because a lot of them would decline, and a lot of them looked like they should decline.
Hmm.
Uh, we went to this one kung fu school, and they were getting ready for some international, like open style contest, like very few rules, kind of almost Vale Tudo kind of thing. And we didn't know that when we came in, and we found out later. And so I challenged the Sifu, and he respectfully declined, but offered his kind of star student, who was pretty freaking stocky, flexible guy. And I remember going in first and him kind of like smashing me with this overhand right a couple of times. And I'm like, fuck. And so I think he keeps doing that. I'm gonna slip the next one, and I'm gonna come up around behind him. I'm gonna fuck him up. And he knew before me, like I was gonna, he was setting me up. So he throws this overhand right. I slip to the side of it, and his heel comes up and smashes me in the mouth. He like threw the overhand, ducked his head, and brought his heel up like a scorpion
Oh my gosh.
and freaking hit me in the face. And I spit blood and felt the loose tooth and told my friend, it's your turn. And he went in and got his ass kicked by the guy. It was
Oh.
amazing. So we did, some of that dojo storming stuff, and that was kind of the thing in the day. And it wasn't maybe the most polite thing to do, but it certainly opened my eyes, especially when I met that jujitsu guy.
Hmm. And I don't know though. It wasn't like looking back right now, you can't do that kind of stuff nowadays. But in the culture of martial arts then, that was just normal. That was just that was just part of, you would go to jujitsu class at night and go, there could be a 250-pound guy who wrestled his whole life and is going to believe that jujitsu doesn't work. And, my coach is going to
And
look at
currently proving it.
yeah. And my coach is gonna look at 16-year-old me and be like, "Hey, I need you to submit this guy a bunch of times, but be really nice to him so he signs up." Like,
Yeah,
okay, sounds good, coach.
sure. Just get on his back, choke him a few times.
This episode is brought to you by BJJ Mental Models Premium. So right now I want to talk to you guys about something that every jiu-jitsu practitioner needs: better understanding of jiu-jitsu concepts. That is why I am pumped to remind you guys that BJJ Mental Models is still offering their premium course, Jiu-Jitsu for Imbeciles by Rob Bernacki, for free to I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listeners. This is not just any course. It's Rob breaking down the fundamentals of his conceptual jiu-jitsu framework in a way that is both straightforward and mind-blowing. Whether you're a beginner or just looking to solidify your understanding of the core concepts in jiu-jitsu, this course will help your game. To get the free course, just go to bjmentalmodels.com/isuck and sign up. You've got nothing to lose, and you have a ton of knowledge to gain. Let's get back to the episode. At this point, what are some, if anything, are there any new things that you are picking up from learning from Rickson? Anything that is, or is it just continual? Is it refinement on the same things that he's always shared?
He has some new stuff. He has a few things that I haven't seen. And, to be fair, I'd never spent a lot of time with the weapon defense stuff. And so that's something that, I'm no expert in and that I'm learning and getting better at, and that I need to up the level of stress that I'm capable of dealing with the weapons and stuff. I'm good at using weapons, but, defending them, especially in this invisible and efficient way that he does it, is still, it's not new to me, but I don't have enough experience with it. And so I'm refining that and learning more of the details of that. And then he has a few things that are kind of new to me as far as, the ground goes and the rest of kind of jiu-jitsu for self-defense goes. But the majority of it is just refinement and him figuring out ways that he can add more stress to it, So it's the first time that you learn some standing side headlock defense. We're doing it choreographed, right? We're both kind of working together to make this thing work, and then you start to hold a little tighter, and you start to keep a little bit more of your base, and then you start to try to maybe give me a punch or something. You start to rip my head around, and you start to maybe like think about pretend I'm going to throw you off the cliff, all this kind of stuff. Different ways to add stress. Maybe someone else is coming into the equation now. Maybe you're starting to pull a weapon out of your pants. All of these ways that we can progress the techniques that are all sharing these very similar concepts and philosophies and stuff, of pay attention to your breath and keep your base and make sure you're, maintaining your connection and denying their connections and using leverage and thinking about your timing, all this kind of stuff. Like every one of those concepts baked into each of these things. And how can we manipulate the environment so that you fail? And then how can we overcome that failure? And in the most subtle ways.
What, when you think about it now, it's kind of cool where you're at. You're on this, even though you've done jiu-jitsu for 27 years, you were right, 2003. Is that my, yep. And so, check my math, but yeah, so 27 years,
I didn't realize that.
that's a long time to do jiu-jitsu, man. During that time, you like, is there a is there a a point now where you're getting to be in this different role? You're kind of a student again, but you're learning so much, and I'm sure that you're also helping during the teaching too. But is there a point of like, or a thought process for you that's like, well, in the future, I'm going to take this knowledge that I'm gaining for this purpose? Or is it still just at this point for you, just that kind of the art of progression?
The main thing is I want to serve my master who's been so good to me. And I want to help him continue to share his gift and his passion with the world. And when we're doing these classes, I may not be speaking a lot, but I'm doing a lot of teaching through the resistance that I'm giving them, through the way that I hold my base. Maybe I'm demonstrating so that they can feel something that maybe Rickson these days has a hard time doing, because it's a weird mobility thing or something, right? So I think of myself as teaching through feeling instead of through words, as they get to feel what they're supposed to do. And they are also, a lot of the guys that come to us their instructors. So we're not only teaching them jujitsu, but we're teaching them how do you teach this to your students. And so they need to learn also this is the type of resistance that your student needs to learn this concept. And then this is how you're going to show them the next level, where as they deal with this resistance, you give them another one and you start to create these dilemmas or whatever, like this for them. And they can start to feel it in their inner ear as opposed to understand it in their mind, how they're supposed to shift their weight and such. We can watch videos all day long, but it's really hard. I think I heard you say it in one of your interviews. It's hard to learn these things without feeling it, especially the stuff that Rickson teaches, because it looks exactly like most of the stuff that everybody is doing. You put a Rickson Kimura from the closed guard on the internet against someone else's, they're going to look pretty similar, but I guarantee they don't feel the same. And I promise you, as those hands start connecting or that pant grip starts coming on, you're not going to be able to stop his,
Hmm.
whereas the others might not know how to deal with that, other than I need to be bigger and stronger.
Hmm. So
But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, all the Hickson guys that I have gotten to talk to recognize that that is um, kind of the barrier or the problem, that these things they need to be felt. And as you pointed out, Hickson's getting older. Um, and I can tell that for all of the ones of you guys that I've talked to, that there is this sense of duty to not let that jujitsu die off,
Right.
to keep that jujitsu. What's the solution?
Well, thankfully, he's touched a lot of people. And even if some of them aren't close anymore, there's quite a few Rickson Gracie black belts out there. I mean, maybe not as many as some other have given, but between the people that I came up with and between some of the people who were adjacent, um, I think there's a lot of us that are going to be able to carry on his legacy and continue sharing his invisible jujitsu as we become more efficient and as we understand it better. And, none of us understand it the way that he does, and none of us can demonstrate it the way that he can and probably never will be able to. But on some level, some percentage of it, hopefully as large as possible, will be preserved through us. People like me, people like Eric Soderberg at Originals Jiu-Jitsu in Santa Monica, people like Jason Cruz at Bushido Mountain in Montana, Crone, people like Shane Rice and Henry Akins and Chris Burns and Jack Toffer and Michael Casey and Scott Burr and Dave Kama and Chris Howder. All these guys, they're out there, they're teaching good jujitsu. And if any of you have a chance to learn with any of them, go, because if you haven't been experienced to it, you're going to be fascinated with the freaking UPA. You're just going
Hmm.
to spend a whole lesson elbow escaping and hip escaping. And I think I think I was a brown belt before Rickson taught me any submissions. It was like I feel so grateful that he taught me to be defensively sound and comfortable in hell. Like that's all he showed me when I was in that garage with him, and a lot of what he showed in class too. And it was now it's like if I see some weird move that I want to try, that's like just fun. I want to entertain myself and go do some flashy, goofy thing. I'm not worried if I fuck it up. I'm not worried if I try to cartwheel pass over you and you end up on my back, because I have so much faith in my back escape. I have so much faith in my ability to get out of side control in the mount. I have so much faith in my submission defenses. I would say 90 something percent of my training time over the past 10 years has just been escaping from submissions. Like when I train, I find myself in submissions at whatever level I feel like that day. Could be seconds from tapping, could be you're just starting to set it up, and that's where I love to play. I love to play in that danger area. I love to see, can I find comfort and relaxation with my arms stretched this far? Like Can I relieve that through some simple movement, or do I need to flip and curse and fly? No. Like finding that efficiency, I would say, that 90 something percent, I'm escaping from submissions and I'm flowing. I'm not using any of my athletic gifts that I still possess in some level, although they're diminishing too as I get older, and saving that stuff for if it's actually a real problem.
Mhm.
I don't find much need to put any oomph into my training these days. And sometimes I think about when I'm training, I imagine I'm wearing a heart rate monitor and I'm just keeping that heart rate as close to resting, zone one, like just chill as possible. And that kind of training I love. And the super hard, high heart rate, scrambly, that kind of stuff is kind of too dangerous for me these days with the
Mhm.
injuries that I've got.
That man, that makes sense. Do you as you've kind of done this for a long time, um, there had to be a point where you started to go, oh, this is this type of training, because like the things that Hickson talks about tend to be being really efficient, staying connected to people, and kind of how you put it as trying to stay in zone one cardio the whole time when you're training. But when it comes to okay, we're gonna put 5 minutes on a clock and these 2 points matter for winning or losing in this tournament, it's very hard to acknowledge like, oh, I should be being more efficient when you could say to yourself, man, if I just drove a little harder, I will score these 2 points and then I'll win the competition.
I
How
think
did you get yourself out of that?
Well, I think that is appropriate for people who are competing. And I
Mhm.
think it's appropriate for a certain amount of time before the competition. But outside of that, I think it's more appropriate to be flowing, to be slowing it down, to be paying attention to what's happening. And I'm fairly certain if you go to any random pair in any jiu-jitsu school after class and ask them, what happened in your role? Both will be like, I don't know. Well, let's see. Well, I think I was in the bottom. Oh, I got you in the sweep. And they don't really remember. It's so chaotic. But slowing it down and flowing and having intentionality into each thing that you do and accepting that didn't work. I'm not going to just spaz out now. Okay, I'm going to accept that didn't work. Now I'm in a worse scenario. Let me play from here. Let me see what I've got here. Okay, that's closed. That's closed. I'm stuck here. Maybe my best thing I can do here is just to find the place where I can breathe. And now I'm just breathing. I'm replenishing. I'm keeping myself safe. And I can just train in this way where I'm exploring. I'm exploring a lot. And eventually you get to the point, I think, if you train the right way, which I believe is getting really defensively sound first. I think if you train to be defensively sound, meaning for the most part, you can escape from all the major pins, then you can drill whatever you want and you can do it against unwilling drilling partners. And I think that is the highest form of drilling. And I used to tell my students all the time after class, you didn't notice, but I was drilling this with you during our 5 minute round. You didn't notice, but I did the same move 10 times in a row. But I did it in a way where it wasn't obvious to you because I know if you do notice, you'll get butt hurt and you'll stop trying as hard because
Mhm.
now I'm just messing with you or whatever. But I'm only able to do that because when I inevitably mess up that drill against this real resistance, I can go right back to that position again because I have the ability to get out of these pins. There's no match, barring a few awesome people who've been doing it as long as I am, who are badass and current world champion competitors and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's nobody that's really going to hold me in side control for a whole round. So I
Mhm.
can just get out and drill that thing again. And I had that ability pretty early on because I spent so much time just finding myself under the mount, finding myself under side control, eliminating one of my arms so it's harder, like holding my breath so it's harder, like creating ways to handicap even when a handicap wasn't necessary, like
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And then also sharpening my skills that were more aggressive on the people who were my level or lower, sharpening the timing for those submissions on the lower belts, sharpening my defensive stuff on the upper belts.
That makes a lot of sense. Honestly, if you can have confidence in your defense, it really does allow you to take so much more risk in your offense. If you're not worried about being in bottom side control, you're willing to shoot up triangles when you're on your back.
I was so like mind blown when I was watching years ago EBI when it appeared that like someone like Gary Tonin would pull mount just
Hmm.
so that he could kip and heel hook people. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, that is crazy. Holy shit. What a strategy.
And yeah, that is, and that also on the other side of things, I think that becomes a testament or lack thereof of a lot of people, even high level competitors ability to control a dominant position and ability to win from a dominant position because as competitors, if there are points especially, but just in general, as competitors, there becomes this obsession on playing guard, sweeping from guard, passing the guard, which is a very, very valuable part of jiu-jitsu in a competition setting. But it's way more translatable and more valuable to be able to say, hey, I can hold down a legitimate black belt from side control. And, I can keep them on their back and I can eventually turn it into mount and eventually turn it into a submission. And that seems to also be a forgotten part of jiu-jitsu.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And there's so much trickiness and stuff that's come in and, you know, weaving lapels around and stuff. And I think some of that stuff has distracted a bit from the essence of what this jujitsu was originally, which was kind of a way to control people and win fights and protect the ones you love. And I think things like beer and bolos and flying omoplatas are beautiful to watch and they're really fun to do and they certainly break up the monotony of working on a small number of moves to perfection for years and years and years. But they also come at an opportunity cost. Every moment that I spend practicing those things, I'm not spending building a better reflex to dodge that punch or building a better connection and base on my feet and challenging those things that aren't quite as flashy and fun and don't get the oohs and ahs from the crowd watching while they're sitting on the wall.
Hmm.
But it is fun, and I know all the. I was grateful and lucky to learn the leg lock game from Danaher and from his guys, and spent a good amount of time training with those guys and learning that stuff. And I'm grateful to have that in my game, and I think it is valuable. And I want to find a way to incorporate leg locks into Vale Tudo, MMA, self-defense kind of stuff. It just needs more battle testing because a lot of people getting punched in the face and knocked out while they're trying to, I mean, including the one I was just kind of talking about, who, you know,
Hmm.
it's a fact of life, but I can't deny that it's going to be infinitely easier for me to break the knee of that 260-pound linebacker than it is for me to break his elbow.
Hmm. So let me just kind of do go a little change of pace here. I wanted to ask you, this is and you've referenced it before. There was a point for you in 2000, it's not like the move to Florida was the first, hey, let's drop everything and completely change our life and move somewhere different. It wasn't the first time you did that. You hinted at it that you started a cannabis farm in Oregon in 2016.
I think so, yeah.
And so on that, and we can even, I kind of even want to pick your brain on that just for a second too. But before, do you think that where you're at in Florida is going to be the place that you stay, or do you think that there is years down the road still another James Driskill, let's drop our lives and move to a different place and, I don't know, become an accountant or something like that, or start a jiu-jitsu school?
Definitely not an accountant. That's
Oh,
never, that's for sure. That would drive me nuts. But yeah, I don't know. I guess I do kind of enjoy moving around and getting to know different cultures and environments and people and stuff. But I also like having a home base, so it's hard to say. I would say I'm definitely here for as long as Hickson needs me, and I think it's probably a good chance that I at least spend some time outside of Florida, just summertime. I'm still I only moved here in February. I'm still kind of nervous about summertime. It's
yeah.
only April and it's already hot outside, so it's going to get gnarly. So I mean, maybe it'll be like an escape the summer sort of thing somewhere at some point if I'm lucky enough to make that happen.
Hey guys, let's take a quick break from this episode to talk about something very near and dear to my heart and my butt. You guys know I've been rocking fanny packs since before they were cool. Some people would argue that they still aren't cool, but those people are wrong. Whether I'm at the gym, traveling, or just running errands, it is my go-to accessory. And recently, Datsusara sent me one of their fanny packs, and I have got to tell you guys, it is next level. It is the perfect size if you are looking for something to just keep your everyday accessories in. It's made of hemp, and it is also not just comfortable, but it's also durable and sustainable. I've been putting it to the test, and it's been holding up to the chaos of my daily life. Seriously, if you've met me in person, you know how picky I am about my fanny packs, about my bags in general, and this one was just an instant favorite for me. If you want to check it out, and trust me, you do want to check it out, head over to dsgear.com and use promo code ISUCK at checkout to get 10% off your order. Datsusara is all about high quality gear for people who train, travel, and live hard just like you and I do. All right, let's get back to the episode.
What else did you ask me? You asked me about the farm?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear kind of your what was the thought process behind that? I mean, I know I have a lot of students that smoke weed and say things like, "Hey, we're going to go start a cannabis farm in Oregon," but they
Hmm.
never do it. You
Oh,
know,
good.
they just show up to class the next night. What was that like for you?
That was in 2015. I had a bad motorcycle accident, and Crone's sitting here watching this going, I told you so too, because he told me never to ride that stupid thing. But I got pretty screwed up on the 405, messed up my spine pretty good. Like 5 herniations, a couple of ruptured discs. And so I was out for like, I think a year, maybe. I couldn't train. I was just in physical therapy. I had to get a bunch of cortisone, epidural kind of shots in my spine and stuff. And so I wasn't sure if jujitsu was going to be a big part of my life anymore after that. I knew I could still teach, but I didn't know if training was going to be a thing. And Crone and I had kind of separated a little bit by that time. And so I was just sort of teaching private lessons in LA and going to school, college for fun, and um, didn't really have a path really forward or a vision too much. Just kind of floundering around, kind of. And then my wife's father and cousin owned a medical cannabis dispensary in Oregon. And they said, hey, why don't you guys move up here and we'll start a farm and we can vertically integrate and we can feed the dispensary and all this. And I'm like, well, shit, I don't know if jujitsu is going to be my thing anymore. And um, maybe I'll just nerd out and learn how to grow things. I didn't really know anything about growing anything. But I love to read and I love to study. And so I just read all the books on agronomy and botany and cannabis and just soil health. And I studied with Elaine Ingham, who's a kind of a godmother of soil microbiology. And she taught me how to use microscope and identify microorganisms and make healthy soil and compost and all this stuff. And kind of went and became a regenerative farmer. And, took a lot of pride in not only growing high quality medicine for people, but also regenerating and improving the landscape and the environment that I was working in. And we even won third placed best flower in Oregon one year. So it was pretty great, but we never made any money. But I mean, we didn't treat it too much as a business. We were kind of more doing R&D for my wife's mother who had cancer, and we were trying to treat her with the cannabis among other kind of herbal things and stuff. So moving out there and starting that, it was a chance for my wife to be close with her father, who lived out there, who she hadn't had a lot of time with him over the past decade or so, and she wanted to be closer with him. And he's amazing. I just love that guy. He's freaking hilarious and, terrible business partner, but just the fun guy to be around. He doesn't want to work. He just wants to go fishing and shoot guns, and I'm pretty easy to convince. But yeah, the farm was a cool experience, and even though we had to shut it down, and even though it wasn't really super successful monetarily, I feel really blessed and grateful that I learned a skill set there that if, God forbid, something happened in the world and things got really hard, I could grow enough food for my community with no outside resources, like with whatever's here, just need seeds. I can grow and take care of a community with food. And that's, it's not valuable at the moment, but in one of those shit hit the fan scenarios, that makes me a pretty valuable member of the community.
Hmm.
Maybe even more so than being able to strangle intruders or whatever.
Well, there's some type of gardener and warrior quote, so I think it's good to be both, you
It's
know?
uh, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than be a gardener in a war. Yeah.
Yes, and yeah, I think that you fit that description then.
There's something really fulfilling about growing plants and taking care of them and watching them get big and healthy and protecting them from bugs and diseases. It's almost like fatherly kind of
Yeah.
thing. Pretty cool. And it's so meditative, like jujitsu, like working with the plants and doing jujitsu, both very meditative. I've always thought that people fall in love with jujitsu because it's a forced meditation. And they can't bring themselves to meditate, but at home, sitting with their eyes closed or whatever. But this will force you to. There's no way you're going to be thinking about a bunch of nonsense while somebody's trying to rip your foot off.
Yes, that is so true. On So in the cannabis industry, is regenerative farming wouldn't be a common practice, right? Or am I wrong on that?
No, no, it's the opposite, quite the opposite. Cannabis has been, I can't just blame cannabis, agriculture in
Yes.
general. Modern day agriculture rapes the land. And the topsoil, I mean, I don't want to get into too much of this, but the topsoil is disappearing at record rates, and the biology in the soil is being killed off by all the chemicals and pesticides and bullshit that we have to use. It's like our food system globally is sick, and we keep putting band-aids on it, and we keep treating it with antibiotics and stuff, not realizing we're killing its own immune system, and it's not the way. And my soil microbiology teacher said something, I can't remember exactly the time frame, but she said if all agriculture in the planet magically switched to regenerative practices, we would return to pre-industrial revolution greenhouse gases in a few seasons, like quickly.
Really?
I don't know if that's true, and some scientists might disagree because of ocean currents or whatever, but the fact is, like, saving the soil microbiology was my passion and my drive for a long time. My what I was evangelizing, I guess. This all happened during COVID. I was really grateful that to be a farmer during COVID because I didn't have to play all those fucking bullshit games. I didn't have to go along with all this nonsense. I was just on my farm, separated, and I had to deal with this stuff. Except the occasional trip to the grocery store and seeing people with their crazy outfits.
Hmm.
Um, but where was I going? Oh no, I lost it.
We're just talking about, right? Honestly, we're talking about soil biology and
Yes. That's it. So people would ask me about how I felt about this or that with COVID or politics or whatever, and I'll be like, I don't know. And they're like, you don't pay attention? I'm like, no. And they're like, how could you? And they start reprimanding me. How could you? Don't you want to save us? Blah blah blah. I'm like, bro, you save the world your way. I'm going to save the world through the soil. I'm going to save the world through helping people feel more confident in their life through jujitsu and saving the soil. And that's my way of helping the world. I can't save the whales. I can't save all the dogs. I'd love to. I can't save you from the vaccines or make you get more vaccines or whatever it is that you think needs to happen. I don't want to be involved. I'm just going to stay in my lane over here. This is what I know about.
That's really cool. Do you farm slash garden anything now?
Hickson's wife Cassia gave me a eucalyptus tree, so I'm taking care of that in the backyard. But I'm renting this house, and I'm just reluctant to start anything, knowing that there's a good chance that we might move to a different place because we just got this sight unseen from California just to quickly kind of get over here. And I don't know if this will be where I stay. So I'm excited to start a garden and especially start like a compost pile uh, wherever I end up more permanently for sure. Maybe I'll start one here and just gift it to the next person, but they 100% won't know what it is and get rid of it for sure. They'll think it's just like garbage that I left for them, not knowing it's black gold.
That's funny. That's my the reason I'm kind of aware of this stuff is my brother is a regenerative farmer. And
Hey,
so yeah, the compost, he works with a ton of animals to kind of
every
regenerate the
farm
soil
starts with
too.
chickens. What I was taught. Every farm starts with chickens.
Yep, and that's yeah, he's got a ton of chickens, he's got cows, he's got goats, pigs, lambs sometime. He's always got different stuff. But it's that it's funny how much that like someone who does regenerative farming just loves the soil. You know, it's like a jujitsu guy loving the scene in a movie where there's just a little bit of grappling. It's just that like
Sometimes I just go grab a handful of soil and stick it on a slide and look at it just so I can identify nematodes because I miss doing
that's
it.
so funny. That's so funny. So when you make this next crazy move, you'll probably start a farm jujitsu accounting firm, right?
Yeah, that'll be the way. As long as someone else does the accounting, that'll be sure.
Perfect. All right.
Maybe like a little meditation spot too. That'd be great. I like to try to convince as many people as I can to meditate or breathe or something, even if it's 3 minutes a day, just be consistent and do something like that. It's so valuable and it's so hard to start that, but
You know,
easy to.
eh, just on that note, I had actually I don't even know where I had seen this. I don't know if it was a video of you doing this or something, but you had maybe it was something written, but you had during COVID given some tips on maybe it was your Instagram. I don't know where I'm thinking of this, but anyway, you had given some tips on
Visualize.
uh yes, on visualization and you use something about like totally, closing your eyes and focusing on one sense. But just could you give me just at least a little thought on visualization, on meditation, kind of the why and even the what?
Yeah, I mean, meditation, of course, is a blanket term that covers a lot of different activities, but this particular one of visualization meditation, it's like I used this a lot to prepare for competitions with Hickson's guidance. Like I would imagine, for instance, driving to Cal State Dominguez Hills, whatever the tournaments were all held back in the day or one of the freaking high schools even before that. And I would imagine parking and getting out of the car and grabbing my gi bag and looking at the other competitors and watching the ones that are my belt and seeing how big they are and wondering if they're in my, all this kind of stuff and getting closer to the building and starting to hear the announcer and starting to smell the Silvio's if he was there or the pizza or whatever, barbecue or stuff, and hearing the stomp on the bleachers and just tuning in to all the sensual experiences of the tournament, even outside of getting on the mat. and and then warming up and finding my ring coordinator and weighing in and putting my gi on and tying my belt and standing on the other side of the table from my opponent and bowing, coming on the mat and putting on the green and white or green and yellow belt and all of these steps, just visualizing this, maybe watching it with my eyes and my imagination, maybe listening, like I said, smelling those foods, feeling the vibrations in the air, feeling if there's a fan or something, just tapping in, tasting maybe what I had for breakfast or, whatever kind of that metal taste that you can get in your mouth, when you're nervous and stuff, and feeling my heart beating in my chest. All of these things, just visualizing this as a way to kind of desensitize myself from that whole experience because it can be quite um, exciting, for your system to go through that. And that excitement can be detrimental to you if you're starting that match with a heart rate that's a little bit more elevated than your opponent. You're already in a deficit. So I want to try to keep that heart rate really, really close to resting while still being warm and warmed up. And and then even visualizing the match itself. And that part has a lot of nuance to it, depending on where you are, how far out you are from the match. And if we're far out from the tournament, maybe I'll visualize more difficulty. If we're the day before, I'm visualizing only success and I'm visualizing my hand raised at the end. But you can practice this sort of thing because that's difficult to do. If you just tell somebody to do that, they're going to try and they're like, I don't fucking smell anything, like. So you practice that with something that you're really familiar with. You practice that with your kitchen or your childhood bedroom or your wife, in bed with you or something. Like you practice smelling and feeling and on all these different senses, maybe even a sixth sense, where I can sense a presence or whatever. You get into that with a much more familiar environment or memory or whatever. Um, in order to develop those skills and that ability to tap in and tune in to those things individually. And then on these training sessions where I would do that, I would just kind of pick one of those five or six senses and tune into it, more than the others. So maybe I would visualize my childhood bedroom and try to see my little 13-inch TV with its built-in VCR and and in the little shitty IKEA whatever stand it was sitting on, and all this kind of stuff, or feel the carpet and the floor of my room, and really try to get that tactile sensation on my hand. All this stuff was really valuable, and it's a way that I feel like when you get good enough at that, the research shows that your brain can't really tell the difference between actual activity and visualizing the activity. And I think they proved that with some, or I mean, they suggested that with some basketball players that they had, maybe a third of them shoot free throws, a third of them visualize shooting free throws, and maybe another third do half and half or something. And, the visualization group did kind of just as well or better than some of the other groups. So, but it does take practice, and it's something that nobody's going to be able to pick up. It probably took me a year before I really could tune into all the senses and stuff.
So do you mix this at all with breath work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know if I would mix it, but I do a lot of breath work, and breath work is another one that's a blanket term that covers a lot of different work
Hmm.
that I think my favorite breath work is, the diaphragmatic exercise that Hickson's famous for, as well as the kind of Wim Hof hyperventilating for, cold tolerance and DMT experiences and stuff, as well as the kind of Buteyko, hypoventilating where you're kind of depriving yourself of oxygen and keeping your, building a higher tolerance to CO2, under work and all these kind of things, where you're kind of exhaling and holding an evacuated lung for as long as you can, and then just taking little sips in and blowing out, but never taking a full breath in. This is miserable. This can create that feeling of I want to quit and I want to die, just like running the hill sprints and the sand dunes and the horrible shit that we had to do when we were training for tournaments and fights and stuff. I find that the hypoventilating can cause, oh, sorry, can cause a similar, if not even worse, amount of stress, and that instinct to quit is gnarly. I really highly recommend. You can try it right
T
now.
tell me more about that. I don't feel like I've know this one.
In 15 seconds or 20 seconds right now, just blow out all of your air and hold it for as long as you can out, and then take in a tiny sip in and then blow it out again instantly, and then hold that for as long as you can, and then take in a tiny sip and blow it out instantly and hold that for as long as you can. And if you can get past 2 or 3 iterations, you're already pretty freaking tough.
Really? Okay.
Just it's maybe it's not as apparent immediately because we're sitting still. It'll become more apparent if you even just walk.
Man,
Or
I could feel my body start to heat up just from those that 15-20 seconds.
the stress will pick up, depriving yourself of that. It's not just making you mentally tough, it's also chemically changing your system so that you can tolerate more CO2 in your blood. And so when you're working really hard and you're fighting and you're like, you have that instinct to, that's because of the CO2 that's building up in your body, and you're trying to take in more oxygen, but it's unfortunate that it becomes, like, as I understand it, it becomes like a vicious cycle where the more you gasp air in, the more you're kind of creating more CO2 kind of, so holding that evacuation out and then getting more tolerant of that will allow you in the fight to, or in any circumstance, to mix these kind of breathing styles, like Rickson would. So it's kind of a similar thing where we're not focusing a lot on taking a big breath in. We're focusing on emptying all of that CO2 and all that spent gas out of the lungs, similar in that way. But we're just taking it to a level where now we're causing a lot of stress through depriving ourselves of the oxygen at the same time.
And so you had mentioned even a couple of times holding your breath in training. Is that kind of what you meant?
It's like if I'm training with a white belt and I've already kind of eliminated both my hands, I'm holding my belt with both my hands, and I've got him in a triangle or something, and he's struggling to get out. And I know that I can just squeeze and finish him. Can I squeeze and finish him while holding my breath? Can I do it that fast? And if I can't, am I going to give up because of this anxiety and this horrible feeling that I've got going on? Like, he's not making me want to quit. Something is making me want to quit. And that way, this training round is more beneficial to me than just playing with this white belt and helping them discover more moves. I can do that too, but I can do that while holding my breath to create some stress for myself.
That's really interesting. I
You,
really,
you handicap yourself all the time with your students, whether you eliminate a hand or you close your eyes or you limit yourself to a certain set of movements that you're allowed to do or whatever. This is just another way to handicap yourself.
that's really interesting. I like that
Do
idea.
the same thing maybe by doing 30 burpees and then roll with the white belt, and your goal is, I need to get to mount as fast as I can or something without hurting him.
Uh-huh.
Wow, freaking got, you know. And
That's
so
really
maybe I'm trying
interesting.
to get to the mount on this white belt after 30 burpees, and I have a split goal of, I want to get to the mount, but I also want to lower my heart rate as fast as possible. So these are kind of conflicting goals. I need to go as fast as possible to the mount, but I need to relax also as fast as possible. How do I manage that?
That's really interesting.
That's a
Yeah.
cool way to train and make training more fun, more interesting, more efficient, especially if we don't have training partners that push us hard.
hmm
This is one
And
thing that Crone was really great at, and Rickson too, is that they were almost always the toughest guy in the room, and they would find ways to make those rounds count more and not just crush everyone. Because
mhm.
what are you learning at that point? You're sharpening by such a small amount at that point. There's other things that we could sharpen more.
Man, that's really interesting. That makes sense. That's a really interesting thought process when it comes to handicapping yourself. And you've heard, I think you've heard stories and if you've coached for a while, you definitely do handicap yourself and don't just, thrash your white belts every single night. You try to add new techniques and perfect old techniques and stuff like that. But yeah, just that those true handicaps really do make a lot of sense when you are easily
Mm.
winning.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, James. We've talked for a while. Do you have anything that you want to say to finish?
Um, Work some self-defense into your training if you're doing sports stuff. Work some sports stuff into your training if you're doing self-defense stuff. A lot of the guys that do only self-defense stuff, they kind of get a bad rep because they don't ever spar. They don't ever add stress. They're just doing these choreographed moves, and that's fine, and that's what you're into. That's great, but find ways to add more stress and start to prove to yourself if some kind of meth head runs at me with a knife or something, I'm not going to freeze. At least I'm going to have the wherewithal to run, if not grab that wrist, whatever. And also, if you have the ability and the means, come see us in Vero Beach and train with the Grandmaster and me.
All right. That's sweet. Man, James, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Oh, one more thing. You asked, I saw the end of your other show and you asked for the biggest piece of advice or something. And I
Yes,
thought
I would love to hear it. What is the best piece of
about that.
jiu-jitsu advice that you've got?
That was the advice that Rickson got from his father, and that was to be patient, not passive when you're training. So you can, even like us, when we're handicapping ourselves against our students and stuff, we can just kind of lay there like a dead fish passively, or we can kind of patiently wait for them to make some mistake and then show them, look, that was a mistake. We don't have to actually sweep them. We can just off balance them a little bit, patiently waiting for them to do something that gives us an opportunity to teach them something. Or in a match, patiently waiting for you to make a mistake and then being ready to capitalize on that, as opposed to just kind of passively moving around and all that kind of thing. I thought that was simple and good advice.
That is really good advice. That is I'm sure that you have a bunch of those type of tips that you've gotten to get. So waiting through all of them for that one, I'm sure was what
Yeah.
what is it about that specific tip that makes you feel or that made you put that at kind of the top of your mind?
I think as we get better and we start to have more students or training partners that are lower than our level, it's easy to get passive. And you're like, oh, I'm letting him work, and that's fine and that's noble, you're letting someone work, but you can do it in a way where you're not wasting your own time.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
And it's just a bad habit to build in any passivity into fighting. Like it doesn't belong there in any way.
Hmm. And that's yeah, and it's probably I think for a lot of us it's hard to even recognize the difference.
Totally.
When am I being lazy? When am I actually being patient and, gonna and waiting for this next thing to happen? And so that's something to really be mindful of.
Mindfulness. Love it.
All right, James, thank you for being on the show, man.
Nice to meet you, brother. Have a great day.
You too.